Welcome to part 2 of the Aiming for Achievement series. Today, we will focus on the decision-making process related to accessible instructional materials and look closely at how each step requires solid thinking and planning on the part of the Individualized Education Program, or IEP team. Included in this presentation is an introduction to the AEM Navigator, an online tool developed by the AEM Consortium and made available on the National Center for Accessible Instructional Materials, also known as the AEM Center website. The Navigator is a process facilitator that contains in-depth information and scaffolded supports to guide decision-making at every step of the process. The most efficient and effective way to consider the needs for assistive technology is through a decision-making process, and really, the same holds true for AIM. Basically, there are 3 steps that teams must take in order to ensure that students who need materials in these formats have them when they need them for educational participation and achievement. These steps include: 1. Establish need by means of comprehensive evaluation. 2. Select specialized formats needed by the student for educational participation and achievement. 3. Commence the Wyoming process to acquire needed formats in a timely manner. We have a publication that goes into great detail about this process on the NIMS website under Forms and Resources. You can follow the link on the slide. Determination of need. In this step, the team thinks about whether the student can 1. Read and gain information from standardized print-based materials used by all students. 2. Needs the materials in a specialized format. Or 3. Needs modified content or alternative materials. If the student is able to understand the content presented in textbooks and other related core instructional materials that are used by other students across the curriculum, but is unable to read or use them, the student will need another way to get the information contained in the printed materials. In this case, the student may need specialized formats of the curricular materials. Specialized formats are Braille, large print, audio, and digital text. Detailed information about the specialized formats was provided in Part 1 of this series. Some of the specific types of information that can be used to help the team make the decision about the need for specialized formats includes, but is not limited to: 1. Reading level, including formal and informal reading diagnostic information. 2. Indications in individual education IEP plan or 504 plan. 3. Academic achievement scores and grades. 4. Curriculum-based assessments. 5. Statewide and district-wide assessment participation and proficiency. 6. Sensory abilities. 7. Physical abilities. And 8. Cognitive abilities. What methods can be used to gather additional information to support decision making? 1. Trials with materials in specialized formats. 2. Formal measures conducted by a psychologist or a reading specialist, an audiologist, a vision teacher, a physical therapist, an occupational therapist, etc. 3. Learning media assessments conducted by vision specialists. And 4. Evaluations. A specialized format of a print-based material includes exactly the same information as the printed materials. The specialized format does not change the content, only the way in which the content is presented to the student. The specialized format neither adds nor changes any information. Modified material may address the same goals, but the content of the material is modified or changed in some way, usually made less complex, so that it can be understood by the student. Selection of formats. To start the format selection process, the team gathers information about the print instructional materials used across the curriculum in which the student will participate. In the next step, the team considers the student's skills, needs and preferences, the environments in which the student will be working, and the tasks for which specialized formats will be needed. Thinking about the student, environments, and tasks helps the team understand how materials are used so that the team can make a good decision about which of the combination of specialized formats, Braille, large print, audio, and digital, will work for the student. Next, the team determines which specialized formats will be useful to the student. They select the formats needed by the student based on matching the student's needs and the instructional context needs with the features that can be manipulated in the specialized formats. More than one may be needed and can be selected. The team uses the information gathered to identify which print instructional materials are needed in which format. How to acquire AIM. There are 5 common sources for acquiring AIM. The National Instructional Materials Access Center, or NIMAC, Accessible Media Producers, or AMPs, publishers via the Access Text Network, and do it yourself. The following is a summary of each source, the type of materials they provide, and a description of who is eligible to receive materials from them. In-depth information about the legal context was provided in Part 1 of the series. The National Instructional Materials Access Center, or NIMAC, is the repository of textbook files developed in accordance with the National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standard, or NIMAS. In order to receive specialized formats created from the NIMAS source files in the NIMAC, a student must 1. Have an individualized education program. This means that the child has undergone an evaluation and is or will be receiving special education services under IDEA. 2. Be certified by a competent authority as having a print disability as defined by copyright statute. Procedures for acquiring NIMAS files differ from state to state. We have developed a publication to explain the specific manner in which we acquire and provide materials in a publication called Wyoming Procedures for Providing Accessible Instructional Materials. This publication is available under the Forms and Resources tab on our NIMAS/AIM website. Not being NIMAC eligible does not eliminate a district's responsibility to provide materials in alternate format. It just limits the sources a district can use. For example, it cannot use the NIMAC. Accessible media producers, AMPs, are organizations or companies that produce accessible materials in specialized formats such as Braille, large print, audio, or digital text. To receive materials from AMPs, students must have a qualifying print disability. To receive specialized formats of print instructional materials created from NIMAC files, the student must also be served under IDEA. Bookshare creates and provides files that can be used for students who need materials in digital text or Braille format. They also provide software that can be used to read those files. Learning Ally creates and provides audiobooks with human narration and no text. Specially adapted players or software may be required to play the audiobooks. American Printing House for the Blind creates and provides materials in Braille, large print, and electronic formats for individuals who are blind or have a visual impairment. There are several instances in which publishers can be of assistance with the provision of accessible materials. Upon request, a publisher may be willing to provide a digital file or grant permission for a state or local educational agency to copy or scan materials that are not available from other sources. When publishers provide these files, it is with the understanding that the use of the materials created from the file will be limited to students certified as having a print disability. This is especially helpful when a student with a disability has a service plan, for example, a 504, but is not served under IDEA, or when the material is no longer sold and for which no NIMS source file has been created. These materials are called legacy materials. Some publishers also provide digital versions of instructional materials along with the printed book. This can be very useful if the materials that are provided contain the same information as the printed book rather than supplementary material. It is important to be aware that just because a material is in a digital format does not necessarily mean that the material is accessible to students. For example, text cannot be read aloud, highlighted, or otherwise changed. One of the most promising developments we're seeing is that publishers are beginning to provide some accessible versions of instructional materials for purchase, typically in digital formats that can be read by a variety of digital readers. An excellent example can be seen in the HTML books available from Pearson Publishing at the website www.pearsonschool.com/htmlbooks.l. There are numerous free and commercial sources for accessible materials. Although these sources do not typically include textbooks, they may be good sources of supplementary materials, some of which are required school reading. Items that are available free of charge are typically those whose copyright has expired and are in the public domain. The following is a selection of sources that provide electronic or audio books. Some texts are available for free and other books must be purchased. LibriVox, NetLibrary, Project Gutenberg, Audible.com, online bookstores Amazon and Barnes & Noble, Overdrive, Audio Editions, Blackstone Audiobooks. Although specialized formats are increasingly available through accessible media producers and commercial sources, the do-it-yourself method of scanning, copying, and creating materials remains a way to meet the needs of some students for certain materials. For example, teacher-made materials will almost always need to be created in this manner. What supports are needed? The IEP team should determine whether any of the following supports are needed for your child to effectively use the selected AIM. 1. Technology. 2. Training. 3. Instructional strategies. 4. Support services. And 5. Accommodations and/or modifications. The following is a broad summary of supports that may be needed for a student to effectively use AIM. After selecting the specialized formats needed and determining how to acquire them, the team will need to decide what types of technology or tools are needed for the student to use the accessible formats for participation and achievement. The information about the student, the environments, and the tasks that were identified when selecting formats can be helpful when selecting the technology needed to use with the formats. The identified student needs can be matched to the features of the various technology tools that might be used to deliver the specialized formats. Different levels of training will be needed, depending on the complexity of the technology or tool selected to access the specialized formats. For example, use of large print books would not require much training. However, if a student is using text-to-speech software or a screen reader to access digital text, more advanced skills may need to be taught. Teachers Other school staff and families may also need training in order to support the child at the school and in the home. Students may also need additional types of training, such as when to use a particular format or tool for a specific learning task, or how to ask for needed supports when they are not readily available. Also, staff may also need training and use of these technologies in order to support the student. Scenarios for your consideration. A 10-year-old student with a vision impairment has been provided with eText AIM in the form of a PDF document. The student has used Screen Reader AT to read MS Word documents, but has never read a PDF document before. Is the student comfortable navigating the PDF document with their Screen Reader AT? Scenario 2. If school districts purchase iPad devices for their students, then the schools should consider training students with a print disability on how to acquire assistive technology apps. Educators may need to use various instructional strategies to support students using specialized formats and supporting technologies. When a student first begins using these tools, instruction should include multiple opportunities for the student to understand the purpose, benefits, and outcomes of using the tools. It is helpful to start by providing opportunities for the student to use the tools to successfully complete familiar learning tasks, possibly in a comfortable environment. Gradually building on earlier successes and increasing the functional complexity of the tools will enable the student to learn to use the tools for the independent mastery of learning goals in a variety of environments. The child's IEP team should work together to ensure that teachers and staff are coordinating to assist the student in using the accessible materials and monitor the change in literacy skills and access. The student's IEP team should describe any support services needed for effective use of various specialized formats and who is responsible for providing them. Different support services may be needed for different formats. For example, a student using Braille may require specialized instruction from a qualified teacher of the visually impaired, and a student with a physical disability may need the support of an occupational or physical therapist. Additional supports, such as classroom organization and arrangement, equipment management and maintenance, and file acquisition, may also be needed. The use of AIM may require accommodations to the student's educational program. For example, a student may need preferential seating or additional time to complete tasks due to the time required to use specialized formats. Frequent breaks may be needed to avoid fatigue. Some students may need to provide responses orally rather than in writing. The team should consider which accommodations are needed when developing the IEP. The AIM Navigator, a brief introduction. The AIM Navigator is a free web-based tool that facilitates the process of decision-making around AIM for an individual student by IEP or other decision-making teams. The AIM Navigator provides extensive support at each decision-making point through a series of guided questions. The AIM Navigator collects all decisions made by the team and uses that information to create a summary report. The AIM Navigator also includes an optional running to-do list that the team can use as they go through the AIM Navigator to create a list of actions that need to be taken and determine who will be responsible for each action. Also, based on the student's IEP and accompanying information, the AIM Navigator can direct the IEP teams to resources for the acquisition of specialized formats. The AIM Navigator is available on the AIM Center website at aim.cas.org/experience/training/navigator. You can follow the link in the slide. This concludes the introductory webinar on part 2. Thank you for attending.